weather today, so I'm filling in for her. Keep her in your prayers. Today's gospel reading is from Luke 6:27 through 36, and page 1236 in the Pew Bible. Love for enemies. This is what I say to all who will listen to me. Love your enemies and be good to everyone who hates you. Ask God to bless anyone who curses you, and pray for everyone who is cruel to you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, don't stop that person from slapping you on the other cheek. If someone wants to take your coat, don't try to keep back your shirt. Give to everyone who asks, and don't ask people to return what they have taken from you. Treat others just as you want to be treated. If you love only someone who loves you, will God praise you for that? Even sinners love people who love them. If you are kind only to someone who is kind to you, will God be pleased with you for that? Even sinners are kind to people who are kind to them. If you lend money only to someone you think will pay you back, will God be pleased with you for that? Even sinners lend to sinners because they think they will get it all back. But love your enemies and be good to them. Lend without expecting to be paid back. Then you will get a great reward, and you will be the true children of God in heaven. He is good even to people who are unthankful and cruel. Have pity on others, just as your Father has pity on you.
I titled my message today, Tough to Follow, because I'm not kidding, it is. One of my favorite authors and poets is the late, my mind is going blank on me, Maya Angelou. And she made a statement that really affected me. Those who are hurt, hurt. And that's what happens. The people that hurt you purposefully, say ugly things about you, treat you with unkindness, and especially with their negativity, are people who hurt themselves. They don't know how to love themselves. And that's very easy to happen in our society. For example, in China, especially when they had the one-child policy that is now ended, if a family found out that they were having a girl, or they had the birth of the child and it was a girl, we would send it away to an orphanage so that they could try again for a boy. Well, can you imagine what it's like growing up as a girl in a society like that? That you're not valued? In this country, and it wasn't that long ago, that if you had several children and you only had so much money, it was the girls that got the college education rather than the boys. Because the idea was, oh well, they're just going to get married and have a bunch of kids, and so why spend the money on them? They didn't even have the opportunities to find out what they could do or who they could be, because the boys were the ones that were always the ones that were preferred. So growing up that way, it's very, very easy to see how certain people could not really value themselves. Also, if you were different than the rest of the folks, nobody liked that either. They made fun of you, they teased you, they bullied you. And it was worse then than it is now, let me tell you. A lot worse. Some schools are actually clamping down on it. Before it was just tough it up, stick it up, you know. If you were a boy, you know, man up and all that sort of thing. That's the way it used to be. And it's such a problem, or it was such a problem, that I worked with a clinical psychologist who was part of my class funded by the school district. This was in Anaheim. And Dr. John Fry, who was a really devout Christian, who really practiced his faith, would work with people that were very, very negative and didn't love themselves. And a lot of these folks, They knew they had a problem, but they didn't understand what it was. And so what he would do is he would have them, then they used tape recorders, tape themselves at a gathering for a half an hour and then listen back to what they heard. Most of them were shocked at the negativity that came out of their mouths. They were condemning of other people because they felt condemned. They were saying all kinds of horrible things. And they were shocked to actually hear their own words coming out of their mouths. Because I can guarantee you, if you don't first love yourself, it's almost impossible to experience the unconditional love of God. It just can't happen. Because you don't feel worthy. And you don't think anybody else is worthy either. It's a long, long struggle to start loving yourself when you didn't feel loved as a young person. It's not an everyday, overnight kind of activity. It's very, very difficult. So Jesus asks us to love our enemies. And our enemies are those people that treat us unkindly, unfairly, and say evil things about us because they really don't like themselves either. Happy people don't do that. They just don't. And probably another toughie in these sayings of Jesus is to just lend people things and don't expect to have them back. Now, that's hard, especially if you're lending somebody money that more than you can really afford, and then they don't give it all back to you. Maybe something happens to them, and there's resentment, and they avoid you. They don't want to see you because they know they owe you some money or some other kind of tangible thing, and they just don't want to have anything to do with you. And you don't want to have anything to do with them either, because shame on them. You need that money back. Well, he's saying, lend without the expectation that you are going to receive it back. That's tough, isn't it? It is. But that's what he asks us to do. And I think probably the most difficult of these sayings is about turning the other cheek. And I want to tell you that if you are a person who wants to, especially if it's a political thing and you want to have something happen, you've got to do that. How many of you remember the story of India back in 1948, 1947? When the British came in with their tanks and ran over people? And they didn't run out of the way, they didn't fight back. You think, well, that's stupid. But think about it. That is how India got its freedom. Because back in those days, people would watch newsreels when they saw movies in the theater. They didn't have like the nightly news like you have tonight. So you'd have people taking newsreels and then they'd have to fly it back. No satellites. And people saw this and they were outraged. And there were cries from all over the world. How dare you, the British are evil. And so anyway, there was so much outburst and commotion for people everywhere that the British almost were forced to give up their control of India. And also it was getting rather expensive too. There was a financial thing as well. I'm old enough to remember the freedom marches in the South. And so if you wanted to be part of the Freedom March, you had to go to school. They had these schools that would teach people how not to fight back. Because your instinct is the one, I'll just pound them one, right? Isn't that the instinct? But what they were teaching the folks in the Freedom School is how to keep on walking after they send the dogs after you. A lot of these people have horrible bites from the police dogs. The fire hoses, I don't know if you know how powerful those things are. The billy clubs hitting you over the head and having you bleed all over the place. And you think, well, that's stupid. Why don't you just punch them back? one blow is okay, but boy, I'll tell you after that. What do you think would happen if the people in those freedom marches would have fought back? It would be tit for tat, wouldn't it? In other words, they hit me, I hit them. They hosed me, I kicked them. People wouldn't have been so outraged. The outrage came about when people didn't fight back, which really takes a lot more courage, doesn't it? Very difficult. Very Jesus-like. And so what happened is after the marches, and they didn't fight back, the outrage all over the country and other parts of the world as well. How could you treat people like that? And that's when we have all that civil rights legislation that was passed here in this country, because they didn't fight back. And I've seen things more recently of people who needed to have some kind of change, and they were bullied, you might say, by the local authorities, but they just kept on going, didn't fight back, and change was what occurred because of their behavior. Jesus is not the easiest person to follow. He really isn't. And he says things to us that go against the way we've been brought up. I know that. I know that when I was in school, so many, especially the boys, if anyone messes with you, I'm going to teach you to really, take care of them. I remember when I was in elementary school, there was a boy, very skinny, very kind of nerdy, okay? And he was really bullied by the other boys. And his weird family were practicing Christians. That's why I like to use the word practicing. And they told him not to fight back, but to stand up proud and to just, in other words, humiliate the bully. So I remember one time when one of the super bullies in our class started grabbing his glasses and going like this, and he just stood there like a statue. And the other kids got so outraged at this, ran and told the teacher, and that kid got in a big trouble. He wouldn't have gotten in trouble if the kid had punched him back. It's because he stood there just like a statue, straight up, proud. And something actually got done. Because most of the time, nothing happened. And the poor kid that was ridiculed would be beaten up because he couldn't fight back as well as the big bullies who were after him. Jesus is not the easiest person to follow. He really isn't. He tells us to do things that go right against our instincts. If I lend you some money, boy, I better get it back in a month. If you hit me, I'll hit you back twice as hard. If you take any of my belongings, boy, I'm going to really get you in a big bunch of trouble. I'm not going to offer you anything. What about people that ask for something? Do I just say, well, that's your problem. You need to seek your own salvation. That's what my grandmother taught me. I'm glad I didn't listen to her. When I met Jesus for the first time, I met somebody that was so wonderful, that was so powerful, that was so accepting. And I started loving myself. Because even though people around him were very judgmental and accusatory and making fun of the people that associated with him, he modeled God's unconditional love. And because of that, lives were truly changed. Amen.
Amen.